First up, we've got Rob, Freeman and Kit Heyam from the Royal Armouries. Rob is the Community Engagement Officer at the Royal Armouries and has 10 years experience supporting local communities in the heritage sector. Kit is a writer, researcher and heritage practitioner and trans awareness trainer with the author of Before We Were Trans, A New History of Gender. I should say that full biographies for all speakers are available on the online programme, so you can look up a bit more detail there. So Rob and Kit are going to talk about 700 years in the making, a community-led approach to queer and gendered storytelling. Over to Rob.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so I'm Rob. I'm the Community Engagement Officer at the Royal Armouries. And I'm white male, at late 30s, nearly 40. And of my children keep reminding me I have little to no hair and I wear a blue shirt today. My pronouns are he, him.
And yeah, hi, just to describe myself as well. I'm Kit, white non-binary person in the early 30s, 6 feet tall, short dark hair, bright blue glasses. Back to Rob.
Okay, so last year the Royal Armouries reached an important milestone. It celebrated 700 years acquiring the nation's collection of arms and armour. And whilst on the one hand, as the world's oldest museum, it's true that some of our displays and facilities might be a bit archaic and apt to some. In fact, for anyone born after 1323. There's actually a lot of intersection between the topics in the collection within an arms and armour museum and the interests, concerns and experiences of wider audiences. However, despite this, as a museum with a collection that is often associated with male-dominated pursuits such as war, hunting and sports such as fencing and jousting, much of the narrative within the museum's interpretation focuses on how men, and almost exclusively white cis men, have shaped the development of arms and armour throughout the course of history. Of course, we know that it's not just men who are playing an important part in this, but women and LGBTQ+ people whose stories have remained hidden. So, as a museum, we were interested in how we could develop these narratives of marginalised histories and diversify our gendered representation. Which is why last year, we developed a community-led approach to telling stories that would redress the dominant white cis male perspective by working with local people who identified under the LGBTQ+ banner to research and present hidden stories within the collection that surfaces narratives around queer and gendered history. But what do we mean by queer and gendered history?
So the answer to that is, in this case, answered by a pamphlet, which I also have a physical copy of, which Rob has kindly brought, which I co-authored with James Saylor of the University of Plymouth, initially coming out of a project with the V&A. It's called Gendering the Museum, a Toolkit. And it's aimed at museum staff primarily and lays out a step-by-step process for what we call gendering the museum, which is focused on thinking about objects as gendered. And it makes two main points in relation to this. And first of all, that every object has gendered aspects because every object is embedded in a set of gendered power relations. Every object is implicated in forms of gender identity construction. And secondly, that we can understand objects as gendered at every stage of their life cycle. So not just talking about uncovering how an object was used in a gendered sense or who owned an object and what was their gender, but also who made it, what materials was it made from, how those materials were sourced, how elements of its design might be gendered, and what its actual life has been in terms of gender interpretations as well. And I'll give you some concrete examples of what the heck I mean by that in a few minutes, but first back to Rob.
Just to say, we will have copies of the toolkit available for anyone that wants to take a copy away with them, and they are free. So please help yourself to one, and they'll be available throughout the 2 days. And for anyone online, I'm sure we can make available a link as well to the online version. So, how did the project start? Well, as a museum, we were interested in how we could work with Kit and the local queer community to apply the research techniques from the toolkit to our own collection. Now, from the start, it was very obvious that there was one standout object that we have in our collection, which would make a good jumping off point for exploring queer and gendered histories. And that's this object here, which is a presentation sword that was gifted by the Chevalier d'Eon to her friend, the poet George Keat. Now, d'Eon was a French diplomat, spy, and soldier from the 18th century who was assigned male at birth and later lived her life with a woman. She was also an accomplished fencer and refused to be limited by the social expectations of the time. So we invited members of the local transgender community to attend a workshop at the museum in May 2022, I think it was. And at the workshop, the participants learnt about the life of Chevalier Deon and the sword that we have in our collection. And the feedback that we received from the participants was that they wanted to find out more about other aspects of the museum's collection that related to gender history. Now, after receiving funding from Leeds 2023 as part of a year-long celebration of culture in the city, we started working with the wider LGBTQ+ community in January last year on a project that became known as Forgotten Battles, Gender in the Armories. Now, the project was broken into two stages. Kit's going to talk a little bit about the first stage, which involved recruiting a team of paid researchers who would research 10 objects from the collection that had been identified by museum staff as providing opportunities to revealing hidden stories of gender.
Yes, right. So, yes, the first stage was research, and it essentially involved using the methodology later in the toolkit to research those 10 objects. And I'm going to give you an example to show what that kind of looks like in practice. Right. So, most is, there's a little bit of information there on how we kind of selected the objects, but this is a 18th century musket known as a Brown Bess. And what the research looked at in terms of its gendered aspects were, first of all, the origins of its feminine name, which was slang in the 18th century for working class women, and looked at its place in popular culture, where the gun was talked about as sexualized from both the heterosexual and the lesbian perspective. Looked also at its manufacture. It was made by a man, as it put together by a man, but guns are made of many components. A huge number of people are involved in the overall process of gun making. And in particular, in Berlin, where it was made, the nail industry was dominated by female workers. And we looked also at its use. It became the standard musket for the British Army during the War of the Austrian Succession, which was a war about whether a woman could succeed to the Habsburg throne. And it was also the driving force behind the colonization of India by Britain, which Kitton wrote most of the empire which we now possess was won through the use of old-fashioned Brown Bess. So that, of course, involved the imposition of European gender binaries and ideologies on the Indian population. So that's an example of what gendering an object kind of looked like from that research perspective. And other objects included things like a scattered mount with a female figure of victory, a Japanese polearm known as a women's marionata, a rifle relenting to the King of the Ashanti in 1878 of a type used by the all-female or all-aside female regiment, the Dahomey Mino. And so those are some examples of what the research looked like.
So following the research stage, we moved on to stage 2 of the project, which involved recruiting a team of volunteers from across the queer community to create a self-guided trail leaflet taking in the 10 objects that had been researched, as well as a temporary exhibition which would respond creatively to the stories of gender revealed by the research. Now, we brought in different colleagues from various teams to work with the volunteers, most notably our interpretation team, who supported the group to develop an interpretation plan and create a design brief for the trail and exhibition. However, despite having the expertise within the museum on how to put on an exhibition, what we didn't have is experience of working with this particular marginalized group, or indeed their trust. So it was important that we worked with somebody from within that community who also had experience in museums to act as the bridge between the museum and the community. And that's where Kit's role was so important.
Thanks, Rob. So yeah, my role was community project lead. We designed the leadership structure, so that Rob was the lead from the museum side, I was the lead from the community side, and it was important. That was really important in creating a safe experience for the queer volunteers, which is what I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about now. So how did we do that? Firstly, I ran a session in my capacity as a trans awareness trainer to equip everyone with the knowledge to treat trans people and trans history respectfully. And I do want to emphasize the importance of that last point. You know, I think it's increasingly well known that there can be a big demographic disparity in museums between front of house staff who skew younger, skew more marginalized, versus curatorial and interpretation staff who skew older, less marginalized, and among queer identities are still less likely to be represented. What that means is it can be quite common for a visitor to have a lovely, affirming, inclusive experience being welcomed at the museum and then go into the galleries and find queer history is invalidated, misrepresented, or erased. So the training I did focused as much on negotiating queer histories, and particularly trans histories, as it did on things like making sure the museum had a gender-neutral toilet. And that wasn't immediate, by the way, it was changing the labeling on the Chevalier Neon sword and the stuff to a toilet people could use. And when we designed the main project and we knew it was going to include some community curation, we planned a workshop on that too, because we knew that it was likely to cause some nervousness around staff who'd not done that kind of project before, and we wanted to prepare them in advance to kind of have their feelings about that and get that nervousness out of their system without having those ask the volunteers. And then, as I say, beside the leadership structure, the role titles explicitly to build trust. And I explained to the volunteers that the point of my role was so there was a queer person in the leadership team. And I facilitated the co-development of the project goals and a memorandum of understanding between the museum and the volunteers.
So we wanted to finish by talking about what we feel we learned from the project. And from mine first here, yes. And I think what I've learned is that we were really privileged, and we can talk in the questions about the funding structure of this if we want to, and we were really privileged to have time to get to know the organisation and its strengths and weaknesses, and particularly where the training needs were. And I think that was essential for making a safe experience for the queer people involved. And likewise, I think I'm taking some time to proactively anticipate what might go wrong and address that proactively through training before any queer people got anywhere near the project, any queer people apart from myself, I should say, was really helpful, and as was the shared leadership structure, which made it clear that this was truly a collaboration. Okay, so these are my learning points. And really, this first one mirrors Kit's point about relationship building and making sure that you build in time to develop trust with the community you're working with. Now, this is true of any community group, but I think particularly marginalised groups who often view a large organisation like the Royal Armouries with suspicion. And I would also like to add to this point and say that whilst we built in lots of time for developing relationships, where we didn't give ourselves a lot of time was in the delivery stage. And 4 months to develop an object trail and put on an exhibition when you're only seeing the group once every 2 weeks is not enough time. And secondly, so the benefits of making clear the restraints on the museum when dealing with contentious issues. So as a DCMS-funded museum, we are not empowered to spend money on anything that is deemed to be novel, contentious, or repercussive. And anything that falls within these categories needs approval from DCMS and the Treasury. Now, whilst there is, of course, that common sense approach that needs to be applied here, to make sure we can avoid creating a risk-averse culture, we do, as an organisation, be careful what we can put our name to. Now, whilst the subject matter of queer or gendered history would not in this instance be deemed novel, contentious, or repercussive, some of the issues that the volunteers wanted to discuss in the exhibition, particularly around the museum's role in Britain's colonial past, were. Now, this did cause some jitters higher up in the museum, and the decision was taken at a very last-minute stage, I have to say, to include a panel, making it clearer that the voices which the visitors would hear in the exhibition were those of the volunteers. So in future, we would make sure that we made it clearer from the start the constraints that we as a museum were under in regard to contentious issues. And then finally, the benefits of a community-led approach where the queer voice is given equal status. Now, initially, the project had been devised as a co-curated project where the museum and community volunteers would be working with local partners. But of course, the reality is that when you're working in a space where the museum already has more hierarchical power over the discussions. The project was set up to give minority groups a voice, empowering them to research, write, and share narratives of their own history. And so for us, a community-led approach in which the museum took on more of an advisory role and the voices of the community were given more prominence in order to create a more level playing field was the right role. Now, I hope I've got time just to very quickly finish on this last one around legacy. The legacy of the project has been wide-ranging, but I just wanted to pick out 3 areas where it's had most impact. Firstly, the institutional change, and Kit's already mentioned a couple in terms of the labels and the toilets. And believe it or not, this is the first time in the armories, in our 700-year history, that's worked with community groups to platform marginalised authors in this way. So it really is a big step for the organisation, and it signalled a change for the museum towards a more ethical, people-centred approach to participatory practice. And gendering the armories AHRC research project. So the work to uncover hidden stories of gender and queer history is finished here. He is working on an AHRC research project to expand the research which we started during the project, and I'm sure Kit will perhaps talk to you during the break or as part of the questions as well. And then finally, Armory 700. So this brings us back to where we started with our 700-year history and a period of huge change in the museum as we recently launched Armory 700, which is a program of major capital projects and initiatives that includes a refurbishment of the permanent galleries. Now, it's projects such as Forgotten Battles that will contribute to the ways the collection is displayed and interpreted in these new gallery spaces for many years to come. I just want to finish off what I think is the greatest legacy, actually, and that's the impact that a project can have on individuals. Now, here are some of the comments that we've had from visitors who have been to the exhibition. This, I think, is my favourite one. It's one that I noticed on our reflection wall the other day, and it simply says, on this day, 17th of September, 2024, a non-binary trans person was
so much. And like I said, Bob, you've actually got to note them down. There will be time at the end. I also was looking at the Museum Association's conference program on the train on the way down. And I think I'm right in saying that you're speaking about that project again there. So if you want to do more, head to please that. So we're now going to head to Queer Britain, down to London. Hear more about Insight in Traveller Community Residency that took place recently. We're going to hear from Shaan, who's a heritage professional issue researcher at the University of Brighton, and Knan Carreira, who's a non-binary artist and is the program and community events manager at Queer Britain. And no doubt any questions as we go. I'm going to invite all speakers up at the end. No.
It's like short film. So my name is Knan, as Rachel said, I'm as well I'm an artist, performing community events manager at Queer Britain.
Let's say Shaan Knan, and we worked in a collaboration on our exciting project that entitled Queer Britain's First Community Residency. And so the subtitle of this is how can create practicing agents to marginalised queer communities in heritage settings, which is essentially also the research question of my PhD. So that worked really well in terms of how we took these insights, worked on the Traveller Plus community, specifically the intersection of LGBT and being a traveller, meaning, and I'm going to explain what kind of the definition of that community is a bit later. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about what is a community residency.
Yeah, we just stay in time. We have a lot to go through, but yeah, you get the next. Basically, we're on the community residencies. This is a project that basically is a series of ridiculous residencies for historically underrepresented groups. What we mean with historically underrepresented groups is obviously queer stories have been erased from museums, heritage places, but this is even more on an expand as well. We talk about specific groups and marginalized groups like people of color, trans people, disabled people, etc. So these residencies are focused on those specific groups. And so for 3 months, there's different group has a chance to attend different creative sessions, entering the results of exhibition at the end of it. And for each residency, it is quite important that we collaborate with collectives, activist groups, and that have grassroots work already in place. But in a way, we're not an institution that is jumping into the community, but we're amplifying the work that already these groups are developing. I think what is important is also, there is different creative sessions what they're exploring, art that's a tool for a tool for self-exploration. And I feel like the objectives are to uplift the community's operating space and skill development, and also it's quite important to that the final outcome is archive a collaborative collection. So I thought in a way it's interesting to see how the work that we do here can inspire and future generations. It kind of find a little bit like represents the level of content museum heritage spaces. Yeah, I think that's kind of like general view of the Louise residencies. So we can go to the next slide, and I think that's quick shot.
Yeah, so what is this LGBTQ plus travelers project about? First of all, going back to the terminology. So we use in this country very often GRT as sort of Gypsy Roma travelers. Officially, that would be the term for this community. However, in terms of our group, and we decided that that actually wasn't really how we felt was represented. So we chose the Travelers Plus for the most inclusive umbrella term. And that's also what Traveler Pride, one of our collaborators and a group that I also belong to, have chosen as the most appropriate way to describe the community in terms of operative term. So yeah, going back now to me and my role in this. So I came in as a researcher. I'm a technically funded, it's essentially it's AHRC funded research at the University of Brighton. And as I said in the beginning, my topic is exactly that. I explore the intersection of being queer and the traveler plus. And I'm trying to answer that research question of the title again of our session, helping create practice give aid to marginalized communities and heritage settings. So how did we get to this from my side? I started a PhD 2 years ago, and I had already established a relationship with Queer Britain. It goes back to a very long time. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but you can ask me in the break. It goes back to a bean bag at Tate Britain. Yes. It was also a queer event. So as my class did say that with those 15 minutes that we have. But yeah, so it's been like a relationship that's been growing. And so it was just only like it kind of organically came together. We're saying, I'm doing this. And Queer Britain really wanted to work, with marginalized or underrepresented communities, starting the residencies. And it was perfect timing. I have to say it was meant to be. So we went on this journey together, and like they were saying in the previous presentation, yeah, it's really important that sort of trust building, that sort of relationship building with whoever other collaborators. And in this, there were quite a few. So it's Queer Britain, myself with my research project. There was Traveller Pride, which is again a network for queer travelers, as you have here as well, that, how they describe themselves is that provide guidance, support, information to make the life easier for LGBT plus travelers. So those were like the core partners, and we have been working for over a year to make it happen. So it's also quite extensive, but it also needed that, I think, and talk about trust building. Again, we're already taking away the learning outcomes. It was like, I think, as it turned out, an essential part, very similar to what the previous presentation had as learning points. So, just a little bit as a little note, what was special for me, and will also be interesting now in my analysis of my my own research project. I came into the PhD, but also this project, as in terms of positionality, insider outsider. So I came in as a researcher, but at the same time, I'm partly from Romani heritage, and something also I had never really been able to explore in my life because I was brought up in a different community, different faith, and so on and so forth. So for me, it was also like, being part of the residency, and I took part in, as you can see here as well in the photo, in some or most of the creative workshops. Exploring myself, my identity, and sort of becoming more and more part of Traveller Pride, the network, but at the same time also kind of conducting research and in view of actually my PhD, my analysis, my thesis. So it's just an interesting thing as well to grow in, and it brings up a lot of questions in terms of, nothing about us without us, how much should you be like part of the community to be able to actually work with a certain community? Can you come in from the outside, and so on and so forth? So yeah, over to Nat again.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna quickly talk about the creative sessions, what they involve. But I think like what you just said, Shaan, about like feeling like the opportunity to have that space to explore your like multiple identities. It was like something that we saw in the feedback alone. So it really was like a special space. So yeah, the creative sessions, they were basically designed to be a slow development of the skills of story building, narrative building, techniques. And I think to like collage with our creative writing disseminated. We invited two external artists, and I think it was quite important like part of the project as the artists that we invited are part of the community. So it was not only a good way to show like the participants, but have someone that understand the complexities of their identities, but also to be some guidance in terms of like, okay, we're artists working artists, so how you pose your journey. Uh, and to the end, so we do like all these like creative activities, and towards the end of the residency, we have like 2 sessions, 2 weeks where we collectively decide what's going in the final show and what's going to be the final outcome. So I think that's quite key in this project that the exhibition, all the materials that are showcased are decided by the group, so there's not really like a curatorial voice. Also more for guidance. And yeah, the group decided to reinterpret tarot cards from a blue perspective, and later on we're gonna have a look to what was included in the exhibition. I a few examples of the work that they made during the residency. I think this collage is really beautiful because it's about one of the participants decided to explore what it was for them to grow up under Section 28, but also like that kind of like tension between the queerness and the heritage. So I think it's like a really beautiful piece, an example of that meets of lived experience, but also of historical uh, information. No, we're going through history in this beautiful collapse. In the next one is from the same session. So the session were hybrid too, so people couldn't make it to London because like the nature of the community, a lot of people is all around the UK. So it's from one of the participants that wants to build the internet online, and it's completely different to the previous one. They decided to space it on their mom and to create like this beautiful kind of like shrine beautiful on a collage. Then what it was built in this one. There were a few sessions. This is Bella Varadi, one of the artists that delivered the sessions. And yeah, they explore photography, build for image. It was really fun session. We put the next one to see like the results. Yeah, it's like a little bit of like the results for the sessions and photography. And yeah, I think it was really interesting to have Bella to like not only inspire them on how to like build narrative through imagery, but also to definitely that with a very fast on the it this is another activity that we did. This is literally outside of Carreira. So we're next to the canal. So this is participants decide to take this picture brought off the boat. So I think it's really beautiful to an exalt spirit of the reality.
Yeah, it's important to mention that it's also part of the Traveller Plus community are also the boaters, the boating community, and again, a community that is very much discriminated against in this country. I'm not going to go into too much political stuff, but that's why I felt even more important as well a location that we're subjects the canal would be able to go there and take those pictures. How we want to represent ourselves in our communities.
So, and what to make things surprising. And then I think the 2 next slides are from the workshop with like Gemma Lee's. So they did creative writing, and Gemma selected poems from queer artists, queer poets, and also travelers. So they did kind of like mix the poems. You can see the results from this next beautifully. Yeah, so this is kind of like the end of the souls, which is pretty beautiful, really moving session. I think everyone read the poems out loud. And yeah, it was like really emotional stays too. So thank you, folks.
Yeah, it's not less than. Then it's extremely emotional. It's just that those lines. If you're able to read, yes.
Cool. And we're into we are on the 18 plus provenance plus exhibition. So again, I think it's quite important to mention that the show was completely created by the participants, and they decided what was going there. They also created these gallery leaflets. That please grab one. We got a few, so maybe after another weeks. Yeah, it was a really interesting. It's very well taught in space. They showing through the examples of the work during the residency. So like all the collage, the photos, etc. The final album, you can see that for like queer pods, a selection of books, which I think was quite interesting for visitors to learn more about the community, scenes that were absolutely beautiful to read by them, and a very special piece, Cherry Bound. For the ones that don't know Terry, they were drag queen, if the drag race he pay contestant, and that is probably heritage, and they passed away something a couple of years ago. So it was really emotional to have the dress in the space. It also was quite interesting that it came from one of the participants. With someone, like the session that we were planning, one of the participants was had the content of the people that hold the dresses. So he worked hard to have it to the space. We also had 2 photographies of the artist Ben Baradi, which also showcased 2 of the participants. In a video, a really beautiful video that maybe can say a few words about the video. It was basically extracts from images from the residency and extracts from interviews that Shaan did with the participants. So yeah, on the opening day, there was welcome home to the B5 participants, Shaan and me. It was really beautiful. Also, they decided to deliver like a put in the tarot workshop. So it was a way of like bringing what happened during the creative sessions to the listeners and the people else of the opening. Maybe we don't know. That's just.
What do you think, Desiree?
It is kind of like, okay. Like, how well, as I'm worried. You can find the video on Revision. So yeah, maybe just get it both pretty. Line there. Okay, group up series. These are some images of the show. Sarah on Fight the ledge, and these are examples of the work made by the participants. The garden leaflets and installation where the talent bots were displayed. Little bit of the inside of the opening there. It's just a little bit resistance. We happy. Do you wanna a little bit?
Yeah, so in terms of participants' quotes, some of them are from the interviews I conducted as part of my research, but also it was important for the museum to get an idea in terms of what happened in the residency and what are the personal outcomes for people. And so that goes into sort of what are the learning points as well from this for us. So we're not going to read out all of them, but just like some sort of really important things about safety was. And that's part of like, that we created a space where people could feel safe, but also brave in the sense of, really explore their identities and through creative practice. And that we were successful to create that kind of space in the museum. And that, again, that doesn't always happen. The museum can be also a very overwhelming space. In fact, they always sound like, oh God, what do we do in those white walls, right? Can we paint them, cut? But we couldn't, but we created within that, for example, like that tower display, that was really important for the participants to have that colorful, comfortable, corner almost, and sort of to bring the energy in that wasn't in the space before. And I think that's also something perhaps from museum and heritage spaces to think about. So again, the nothing about us without us was really important for everyone. And that people were there, like Knan was saying, there were also artists representing the community. The workshops were led by either participants themselves, like, for example, the tarot workshops, also by other people from the community, for example, from Travel and Cry. There's a lot about well-being and mental health, which also was a really important part in terms of the interviews and the outcomes of the interviews. A lot of people mentioned that because they've been, marginalized all their lives and never been able to really express themselves. And some of them were actually really amazing artists, but they've just never really been noticed or, celebrated as artists. So it's like, wow, the first time in my life, actually somebody said, you are an artist, you are queer, you are a traveler, and we give you a space of actually to express yourself in a heritage site in the way you want to. We're not going to dictate on how you do that. And that worked really well. And people said, yes, that really helped me to actually finally not only accept myself, but celebrate myself. And that added to really my mental health and well-being a lot. And I heard that, it's like therapeutic. It was literally, it's life-saving, stuff like that. So that was also an interesting outcome of like what people were saying. Yeah, but self-belief and like keywords like that, we heard a lot. And yeah, I was just going to summarize a lot more. It was much about representation and self-representation, how we can do that. I just want to read out one quote. I've been holding on my phone for a while. God, I can't see that. I'll try to say it without glasses. You just I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks. So this is a quote from somebody from Traveller Pride. Travelers in the UK are very rarely in control of our representation. Stories are told in our behalf. We are spoken about, but it is rare for us to be the ones driving the narratives. The chance for us to be here and challenge this, look at what stories we want told, and how we want to belong in wider society is a very exciting one. I think that says it all, really.
Yeah, but just to wrap up super quickly, more information. But yeah, just to say that the impact on the visitor on the participants was amazing. On the visitors too, we got like really good feedback for people visiting Great Britain. And I think just to maybe talk a little bit about what's next, the residents are still running. The second one was collaboration with Love Time and focus on migrant men. And right now we're currently running the third one with China, East Asia. So yeah, I think it's also quite important to say that the group is still making work. So the residency was inspiring enough for them to keep producing work together, and they have like a couple of exhibitions lined up. So yeah, keep an eye on socials.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really important aspect for myself as a researcher, but also as a community member. That is sometimes these projects, we all like the funding stops, the money runs out, and we've done the exhibition, we archive it or whatever, and we scrap it, and then it's kind of gone. But actually, what's the beauty about this kind of a queer traveler collective? They've really gone off now. With that feeling really like they've been given agency to be that and set up their own like queer traveler art collective, and now they're going to be doing really amazing things. And also we're going to keep on meeting and going to see if we can do something in the future. So it's actually, I think, a huge impact, and I think that could be something, an idea how we work with other underrepresented communities and build like long-term relationships to support those communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Should I put speaker materials out where the copies were? I'm looking for some HR pieces I wanted on, so people can kind of pick them up on the break. I'm still going to head from we can suddenly go down to London, now going all the way down to Brighton. To hear from Rowan Morgan, who's a researcher and community archivist working with Clear Heritage South, and McAdam, artist and activist participating in addressing disability activism and histories. And they're going to talk about community champions developing increased representation in Queer Heritage South's live archives. I'll hand over to them.
Hi everyone, my name is Rowan, and yep, as I was meant to be, I'm a community archivist with Queer Heritage Society at this past London Noon. Hello there, my name is McAdam, and I am community champion for Queer Heritage South, and yeah, it's great to speak. I'm going to start off and tell you a little bit about Queer Heritage Society and Live Archive, and after I do that, I'll have a chat with Noon about the experience of being a community champion. So just to give you a bit of background to the project, so Queer Heritage Site is the project of a theatre organisation, Marlborough Productions. It's a project of a project, which gets a little bit complicated. But Queer Heritage Site has been conducting cultural work and archival and heritage work for over 10 years in Brighton, starting off with a mission. And starting off with a project called Queer in Brighton. This started in 2012 as an oral history project involving lots of volunteers collecting nearly 100 interviews. It created anthology, you can see there, Queer in Brighton, and lots of exhibitions and events. And in the process, people donated lots of digital materials specifically, and a little bit of physical materials as well. Some of this material you can see here. Some of the things to come out of the project was a real knowledge that people had a real appetite for queer heritage in the city. And Queer Heritage Site launched the LGBTQ History Club in Brighton after that. The role of the history clubs were to amplify underrepresented voices within queer history in Brighton. These are both cultural and academic and personal, and they take place every month in Brighton in lots of different places to talk about histories that are underrepresented. And another thing to come out of this was Going Here, which is a community created exhibition, which was launched in February 2020. That's on display in Brighton Museum still. Did you ever get a chance to look at it? That involved lots of community curators working on research design, magazine, e-making, and was a fantastic project. There are some issues with collecting. We recognise that Brighton is a really unique location. We've got such an amazing history, and we have incredible institutions. But there are issues with the space and the capacity of those institutions to preserve queer heritage in the city and to preserve heritage which looks beyond narratives of particularly of gay men to underrepresented histories. LGBT people are marginalized, but there's also marginalized community within that marginalized community. And so Queer Heritage Site aim to amplify those voices and particularly through a digital archive. So in March 2021, we launched an LGBTQIA plus digital archive called Queer Heritage Site. The aim of this was to be able to get around some of those issues with space and capacity in the museum. We know that collecting physical objects in ephemera is very hard. The capacity for cataloguing to take place at places like the Keep, which is the regional archive, and the capacity physically in the museum is very low. So we knew that we would need to use a digital archive to be able to preserve that heritage. So in 2023, we received funding from the National Heritage Lottery Fund to develop the digital archive with a focus on underrepresented histories within current heritage institutions. We recognise there are particular gaps, and these are trans and non-binary identities, disabled experiences, queer, trans, intersex, Black and people of colour experiences, and all the lesbian history. The NHLF funding is in two parts. So there's a development stage, which is a year long, and then after that, hopefully, there'll be 3 years of funding to deliver the project. So we're currently towards the end of the development phase, and this is where the community champion role comes in. So as part of this project, what was really important was to work with the community, but also give agency to community to be involved within the archive and feel represented within it as well. So I'm not too sure how to play it over well. So this is just a little flick through of the digital archive. You're welcome to go look at this at your own leisure. And so the archive is a digital archive, and contributors can simply contribute using a contribution form, but we also run digitization and collecting workshops. Currently, you have over 400 items on the archive, and it's a really great place to browse collections at your leisure, but also to research as well. At the moment, we're developing the archive in collaboration with the community champions and workshops that we're doing with community groups. The archive is kind of growing in its own way. There are a lot of people's personal collections. And then there's also kind of individual items that people have contributed when they felt fit. One of the most important things about the archive is that people retain ownership of the things that they contribute. So they can choose to donate that later on to an institution like the Keep Archive, or they can keep it for themselves and digitize it and place it online. This is one of the key issues that we have in collecting in Brighton around trust. In Brighton, lots of project work has been undertaken on queer histories before, and the community has real knowledge of those projects and also knowledge of where those projects have gone wrong in the past. So building trust has been a huge factor in this project. So as to the role of the community champion. So a key aspect of the development stage of the project and the funding was to choose a community champion model. So community champions are paid community members who have strong connections to groups recognized as overlooked within current LGBTQ plus collections in the city. So the role is to connect the community to the archive, working together in the development stage of the funding. And community champions are not full-time community organizers. They don't necessarily have any sort of background in archival practice, but they were required due to their experience in connecting communities and for demonstrating real trust and capacity to work with community in Brighton. The community champions currently host sessions with a focus on the digital archive, but not necessarily in archival practice. These have really ranged in their scale and scope, and often involving creative practice as well.
Give us a minute. So yeah, one of the can you bring it a bit closer? Yeah, one of the things that I really wanted to focus on is obviously disabled people in my community, which is massively underrepresented. And due to the level of pay that we went through in the pandemic, it's even more underrepresented. So because of that, I was quite passionate to create a disability archive of disability history and people who are chronically ill, people who have learning disabilities, etc., to have their own exhibition. Now, for those of you who don't know, in Brighton, we had Disability Pride Brighton from 2016 to 2020. And that was an amazing project, which I worked on as a secretary until I had to leave university. But one of the things that was never brought up, which I was really being passionate about at that time, was having an exhibition of disability history in Brighton, Hackney, Sussex. So I've been very lucky to be involved with this project now to start any work again. And one of the difficulties that I'm just going to speak back to some issues here. One of the things that I found really difficult is getting people to be perpetually interested in archiving projects and retaining history, because people in the disabled community don't have any images. So perpetually getting people to be interested in that and getting them to be interested in giving an artifact or a piece of their history has been quite a challenge. I'm not going to lie, I'm still in the middle of working on that now. But one of the things that I've learned is being able to have your own digital personal archive for Google Photos, for example, or Facebook, or any social media is really integral for disabled people to be able to look back on their own history and go, this is how I developed. Because not all disabled people get the opportunity to celebrate their achievements, and in small achievements, big achievements, achievements in the community, volunteering. I've done community volunteering for 10 years. And it's only in the last 2 years that I've actually been able to get to celebrate what I've actually achieved. Being underrepresented, nobody's recognized the small things that I've done, but they've actually praised the big impact over the last 2 years. So we had a couple of questions for you, which I think you covered the first one. I think we'll go for the second one. And the second one was, do you feel represented in institutional archives, and what role do you think community archives play? So, I do not feel represented very much as a disabled person in a powered wheelchair with autism. And the reasons for this are because most of the time disabled people find it quite overwhelming to go into buildings like museums and palaces. Also, oral history also has its own disabled history as well.
And you probably don't need to explain what that is, but it's quite obvious to me as somebody who watches The Crown quite avidly. Basically, as somebody who is quite passionate about disability history and disability activism, especially, it's been something for me that I've never actually seen unless I went to Manchester and seen the Nothing About Us Without Us exhibition that happened with DPAC and the They Are Disabled People Against Cuts and Dan Network, who basically started the protests against the inaccessibility of public transport. So yeah, I don't see that anywhere happening out here in the South. And Lee has been running sessions with disabled community in Brighton and Hove, a very small amount of disabled community who are willing to talk about it because it's quite a big thing. So yeah.
So what have you learned or are you hoping to learn from your sessions?
I'm hoping to kind of delve into other communities because, again, not a lot of representation is given to disabled people of colour. And I want to be able to delve into that. And I have several other community people who are also in themselves community champions who I want to speak to over the next few weeks. It's been quite difficult, again, like I said before, to perpetually keep people interested in getting people to be interested in my project, because when I talk about it, it feels very self-centered, but it's not self-centered. I'm trying to get myself out there to talk to other people saying, hey, it's not just about me. There's a whole plethora of disabled people out there who don't like to necessarily be called disabled. Some of them might have HIV, for example. Some of them might be disabled through a huge amount of different rare illnesses, for example, but because they have been so pushed back by people in their own lives and other personal challenges, it's quite difficult to get people to get them to do the right thing and put consensually the piece of their history into the archive. So that's quite a difficult thing. But luckily, I've been involved in the disabled community pretty much my whole life. And I do know quite well. I know how to talk to people, again, essentially with time, with energy, and be able to be like, this is a really important thing that we can get other people in the future to engage with. If we start a little bit now, we can get bigger in the future.
One of the fantastic things about youth involvement is that you've thought about things that we've not thought about, especially around the organizational sessions. Yeah. Could you speak about a few of those?
Yeah, so obviously we started off with a few online sessions. Tomorrow we have our first in-person session in the Ironwork studio, which I'm very excited about. I'm also very trepidatious about the whole thing. Because I'm scared to do something wrong. But the online sessions have been really important just to engage one-to-one with people, because sometimes there's big group sessions, especially online, you don't get a word in edgeways. I'm sure I've been watching the subtitles, but this hasn't always been perfect. So a lot of people are getting the right information. But that's kind of the great thing about doing online one-to-ones is that you get personal histories, oral histories, things about their photographs, things about clothes that they wore to a queer prom, for example. We had queer prom and brides, and I believe in 2016 and in 2018, which I went to myself. But again, a lot of those little histories, people don't realize what they've done, and then they might become super ill or super mentally unwell, and they can't go out anymore, and they forget those little things that they did that actually created a really big impact in their own lives.
Thanks, David. And got some pictures of me, which is pretty.
Yeah, this is the part which I really don't like. I'm going to stop saying, this is my own personal history. Basically, there are other people in all of these photographs who, for example, one of the things that we did, me and about 3 other people got a little petition to the Brighton Council to stop the Marlborough being turned into flats because, unfortunately, the London Brewery had that case. So I got in contact with a couple of other places in London and Camden specifically who have queer folks that lies on it. You still did, I can't remember which one they were, but they were contacting me going, oh, really like the work that you're doing. And that was really important. And I've been to countless amounts of protests in London and Brighton. But yeah, and these amazing ones that I went to, schools of transport, London, transport, Brighton. And the middle photograph is me at the protests in Level, Brighton and Buns who protest against and protests against the benefit cuts that were happening when the Tories had just come into power at that time. So yeah.
This is just some pictures of the in-person community sessions so far. And just to finish off, some different experiences of being a community champion. So this is Kate's experience, and Kate's been working with the older lesbian community. Kate's had a fantastic time, but also found some challenges as well. In particular, connecting with people that they've known for a long time. That means connecting with their exes, having people that they've not had contact with for quite a while, and navigating those personal history. So that's something we need to consider as well. And also, Kate has said around their neurodivergence, some of the difficulties that they'd experienced with getting so much control over the session was quite difficult. And in that guise, I think as a community champions, we've had 4 community champions for each of the communities mentioned. But it would be difficult to do those sessions without any sort of overlap. And that's one issue that comes out of this kind of model with community champions with different groups. And finally, just Laura as well, having a similar narrative, kind of being empowered, having not had an archival background, but also kind of sports around this give and take between the community. How much are we offering them versus wanting back from them as well? So that is us. You can find us online, and we welcome any questions at any point. And thank you so much for opening sort of that.